I'm going to go to Wayne Madsen right now, and then we're going to play some clips of the lawyer for Palfrey and, of course, myself on Fox News breaking this down at the time it happened. And then Madsen's going to be almost for a full hour on Friday with the lawyer. But this is just a sneak peek and an update on what's happened and the latest developments. First off, great job, Wayne, doggedly being in there. Please tell us who the progenitors of the Cruz sex scandal are, how much validity there is to the hookers. Obviously, Radar says it is the number. You didn't want to go that far. You just said, well, you know, he's got some big problems. How serious is this, and where do you see this going, Wayne?
Well, Alex, I think we're dealing with two different stories here. The Enquirer a couple of weeks ago had one story about 5 women that Ted Cruz supposedly had extramarital affairs with. Of course, that's after his marriage to Heidi in 2001. One of those women was said to be a prostitute, but they did not give that individual's name. This story, I believe, has to do with Ted Cruz before he got married. And if you noted last night when he appeared with Megyn Kelly in a town hall in Wisconsin, Cruz was very Clinton-esque, Bill Clinton-esque, in saying, "I've been faithful to my wife." Well, okay, he got married in 2001, but that doesn't say anything about what he was doing before 2001. When he was a single man, after he left Harvard, he came to Washington. He clerked for Chief Justice Rehnquist. Then he went to work for a law firm representing the National Rifle Association. He also worked on the Clinton impeachment issues. He also represented John Boehner in an issue having to do with Jim McDermott and a phone call that was supposedly intercepted and given to McDermott. But that put him on the radar screen for a lot of GOP individuals. So he then in 1999, he goes to Austin and he joins the Bush-Cheney presidential campaign. And he represented Bush in Florida and the whole thing in 2000 with the election. He wanted to get a job in the White House, but apparently, from what I've been told, he was not very well thought of by a lot of people on the transition team that were handing out the federal jobs. So all he managed to get was a job at the Federal Trade Commission, probably an organization, knowing Ted Cruz's policies, he'd like to do away with. He also had a job as an assistant to Attorney General Ashcroft at Justice. It's during this time frame before he was selected as Solicitor General for Texas by now Governor Abbott, then Attorney General Abbott, that I believe we have the smoking phone calls. When I investigated the Palfrey story, and she told me I was the first one who got all of her phone records because she had given a partial list to Brian Ross at ABC News. She felt very bad about what ABC did to her because here they had some of the lists, and then they come out in a report and said, well, we went through what we were given and we didn't find any names of any notoriety, which was a complete hogwash. ABC took a dive on that. And so at this point in time, I'm looking through the phone lists in a very, I got to say, I didn't have the means to do Intellius searches and whatnot. So I went to the public libraries in the DC area and was looking up all these phone numbers on something called the Haynes crisscross directories, which were used by direct marketers to, basically they had a phone number, then they'd try to match it to an address.
Sure, I should have introduced you as Wayne Madsen, investigative journalist, who first got the full list and risked his life to go connect these numbers to public figures. I mean, this is dangerous stuff you've been doing, my friend.
Well, other than the fact that I thought I still believe I nailed a one-time attorney for televangelist Pat Robertson The other find was the central switch for the Bush-Cheney transition team, which was located at the West Building in McLean, Virginia. And that's very close to where Cheney lived at the time and also CIA headquarters. Later, it became very apparent when Jeane Palfrey tried to invoke the Classified Information Procedures Act at her trial, and the new judge on the case refused to allow that she had some relationship with the Central Intelligence Agency. And I wrote, and I believe still, that was with the executive director of the CIA, former head of the logistics for the agency at their Frankfurt station in Germany, Dusty Fago, who was then indicted and served several months.
Sure. So as best you can tell, and from your sources, CIA connections, intergovernmental wars. She seemed confident. Then she got scared, said they're coming to kill me. I talked to her landlord, you did. Talked to the family. What changed? Why did they decide to take her out?
Well, I think she, there's we've seen a lot of madams in Washington and elsewhere over the years. You remember there was the Heidi Floss that had all the names in Hollywood. And then there were madams going back to the 50s and 60s in Washington who actually they dealt in heterosexual hookups and homosexual hookups. One thing I know for a fact is, and I asked Jeane Palfrey this right to her face, I said, are you only dealing with women or are you dealing with call boys? She said, only women. So, I mean, there were other...
So she wasn't tied into Barney Frank and his call boy of underage boys.
Not only that, well, I mean, also that would eliminate, of the 5 presidential candidates, the viable ones now, that would certainly eliminate Hillary Clinton, although I know she has gone both ways over the years.
No, the word is she'll be with men for power, but she likes the girls.
Yeah. I mean, we know about her and Vince Foster, but now I think it's her and Huma Abedin and maybe a few others over the years. But anyway,
and she doesn't have a good taste in women either. Her girlfriends look like Salacious Crumb. But I'm digressing here. What does this mean, though, to the young Ted Cruz, the lawyer Ted Cruz, with his old number in the stack? I mean, how dangerous is this to him? It looks like he's already falling in Wisconsin polls, losing some of his leads.
Yeah, the problem is if Ted Cruz were a liberal Democrat, who would care, right? I mean, we've seen people like that in the past get outed, and nothing happens. But the problem for Cruz is he's led this life as an evangelical Christian dominionist. He takes a very hard line on social issues. So the problem for him is going to be the hypocrisy. Now,
exactly. I'm not attacking him if him and his wife are split up and this is going on. I mean, I'm not up here saying that I'm the grand poobah of all morality, but at the same time, being anointed by Glenn Beck as the Messiah, I mean, it's so Jim Jones cultish. It's getting crazy.
Yeah, and so I think the biggest problem is, I mean, we know there was some issues with him and his wife. His wife apparently suffered a nervous breakdown at one point in time. And we can't. I don't think anybody can make fun of that type of thing. These family issues. But my focus on him, I think, is before he was married to Heidi in 2001. Now, how did they meet? They actually met in the Bush campaign in Austin. And she did go on to the White House, where she was working with people like Robert Zoellick, the trade representative, and Robert Pastor, who was like a big proponent of the North American Union.
Sure. She's a key globalist, a key gopher of the globalists. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Why was Cruz unpopular with Texas and D.C. Republicans, but he still got plum jobs? And why do they say they hate him? Because the word is, and you've agreed with this historically, Republicans tend to be into the homosexual stuff, the Democrats more into the heterosexual stuff, just on average. And that the word is Cruz may not be bisexual, and so he's not in the whole Austin Republican club.
Right. Now, I think the thing with Cruz is, and I have a story, 2 independent sources told me that while he was at Princeton, as an undergrad, he went to Harvard Law, that he was known as a person who would dress up in women's clothes, sneak into the sorority houses, and basically he was a peeping Ted. He would spy on women in various states of undress going to and from the
that's
shower.
really creepy. So wow.
It's an ick factor with Ted Cruz, I think, and that's the reason he sort of got shunned by the Bush White House. And he said, well, we got to give him a job out of the plum book, but, make sure it's not here. So it turned out it was over at the FTC and some low-level political job at the Justice Department.
Sure, I want to bring up the lawyer who I know you know. I know you've been out with Palfrey and him and others, if memory serves. This Montgomery Blair Sibley has a gag order on him. I want you to flesh that out for us because the numbers are out, but not the names. Let's play a clip. He's coming on the show Friday.
My name is Montgomery Blair Sibley, and I was the attorney for Deborah Jeane Palfrey, known as the D.C. Madam, who for 13 years ran a high-end escort service in the District of Columbia. I am the custodian of the records of that escort service, and since 2007, I have been under a court order restraining me from publicly releasing those records. Those records contain information relevant to the 2016 presidential election. And as such, last month I went into court seeking permission to release those records. Rather than hearing me, the court instead refused to even file my pleadings, essentially shutting the courthouse door to me. I must continue this fight to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeal and then on to the U.S. Supreme Court. To do that, I will need to spend $25,000 in filing fees, printing fees, and attorney's fees for representation in those courts. I need your help to get on that horse.
All right.
Thank you.
He's going to join us Friday. I mean, Wayne, you're a smart guy when it comes to law. Would it be legal for Trump to pay to get these numbers released because, or the names, because the word is it's matched up with Ted Cruz? Isn't that a huge torpedo? Can Trump pay for that instead of us coming and asking the audience to do it?
I would suggest that Donald Trump not get involved in this, but he's got to have a lot of deep-pocketed supporters who could come up with that. That's not when we're talking D.C., that's not a huge amount of money, $25K. What I know about this case with the records is Jeane Palfrey originally had Judge Gladys Kessler as the trial judge, U.S. District Judge in District of Columbia U.S. Court. I attended many of those hearings, and Judge Kessler was very, very sympathetic to Jeane Palfrey and seemed more interested in finding out the identities of the customers of her escort service. A couple times she said, I really think that we ought to be also looking at who the clients were. And the U.S. attorneys there at the time really were irritated at that. That's not where they wanted this thing to go. All of a sudden, Judge Kessler goes to the senior judge at the U.S. District Court and asks to be relieved from the case. I heard through the grapevine that she had been threatened. The woman was single, she lived alone, and it would have been quite easy for her to be harmed some way. Because look what happened to Jeane Palfrey and one of her escorts later. They were both found hanging.
Sure, the professor got whacked. Right. And that's what's so scary about this is they want to indict her years later to cover up that the government was using her. Like, you send the women to prison, but the guys who ran it all don't get in trouble. Just leave these women alone.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. So a new judge took over, James Robertson, who declared a mistrial, and then there was a retrial, and there was a new attorney appointed for Jeane Palfrey that the government paid for from the Orrick law firm in Washington, D.C., a guy named Preston Burton. Now, this is at the point in time where these so-called gag orders are imposed because Montgomery Sibley, Blair Sibley, was then off the case, and there was a court-appointed trial lawyer.
Well, I wouldn't want to be Blair Sibley sitting on top of the names that go with the numbers. I would want to be you having all the numbers. Again, I just keep saying you got a lot of courage, Wayne. In closing, what does your gut tell you about Cruz, where this election is going, the hysteria about taking Trump's delegates, whether you love or hate Trump. I mean, nakedly stealing elections now. This is so crazy. I can't believe it's real.
I think Trump, I'm sorry, I believe Cruz, like Obama, has friends in high places, and I think it's linked to his family. I think we have to look at his dad, Rafael Cruz, Ted Cruz doesn't seem to understand his own dad's history. He says, my dad escaped Castro's Cuba. His dad left Cuba 3 years before Castro took over power. But I've been talking to some researchers in New Orleans that feel that they can place Rafael Cruz in New Orleans in 1963. And that opens up a new can of worms, because if Rafael Cruz was involved in anti-Castro activities in New Orleans in 1963, it's quite clear who he may have been tied up with.
Oh, absolutely. You know what, Wayne? Let's do 5 more minutes, then we're going to get Richard Reeves from Milwaukee. Stay with us. We'll be back. We just have a very weird intellectual view of this and a weird feeling, Wayne, about where all this is going, because it's just so whacked out now. It's so crazy now. It's so bizarre, and it feels so apocalyptic to know we're in the hands of these people that are so out of control. I mean, that's kind of a 3-minute rant there, but what can you comment on about the direction I'm going?
Well, it's interesting because, over the last few days, I was watching some old clips, including the 1960 election between Kennedy and Nixon, and how far we've gone down the drain, because back then the issue was Nixon had a little bit of a 5 o'clock shadow, whisker growth, and was sweating. But the debate was centered around things like Quemoy and Matsu, 2 islands between Taiwan and China. Now we're dealing with all these other extraneous issues. I'd rather not be having to report on Ted Cruz being a peeping Tom at Princeton, and and the ick factor, and messing around with call girls, escorts when he initially joined the government in Washington back in 2001. But that's where we're at, and we've seen it. Just each election seems to get further and further down into the gutter. I think it's a shame.
The word is, though, you don't even get let into higher-level D.C. operations unless you have had sex with call girls. You go to these poker parties, and the room next is the women, and you basically have to do it to even be trusted, kind of like joining a gang. You got to rob a liquor store. And then to some of the higher levels, it becomes homosexual sex, pedophilia. That this is pretty organized now, that you knowingly have to compromise yourself. Instead of the old days being the mafia, you got to make your bones and, kill somebody. Now you've got to do something even worse. I mean, from your deep research, is that an accurate statement?
Oh, I think so. And I'm not saying that our past political leaders were any saints. They certainly weren't. But the focus of elections and the news media was a lot different. And I think that's, you look at that today, and you wonder why we have so many problems, because the real problems we should be addressing are not being addressed, and we're focusing on these other things. So, but I believe that there is something with Ted Cruz, because if there weren't, Megyn Kelly would have not brought it up on Fox last night. It would not be, even though it's there, the story's been in some tabloids. I've noticed now it's being picked up like by the Daily Telegraph in London, newspapers in India, and elsewhere around the world. So I think there's legs to this story.
What else is brewing that I'm sure will be breaking by Friday when you join us for a full hour? What else is on the radar screen?
Well, I really think we, and I know you've been addressing it, this issue with the migrants in Europe, I think, is coming to a head. The other issue is I've looked at these Panama Papers, and it's quite clear there was cherry picking extraordinaire going on there. It was just like the State Department cables with WikiLeaks. The initial releases were all focused on what the Saudi king had to say about Iran. So here again, they didn't nail Putin or the Chinese president personally on any of these. They might have been some acquaintances, some distant family members in the case of the Chinese president, some old friend of Putin from St. Petersburg. But first of all, where are the Americans? There's not one American named. Why was not the focus on individuals like the new Argentine president who was installed by the global bankers in Buenos Aires? He's in it over his head, but that's not the way the headlines read yesterday or today. It's still focused on Putin. And of course, this International Consortium of International Investigative Journalists is funded by USAID, which is another name for the CIA, and George Soros' Open Society Foundation. So it's quite clear where these guys are coming from.
And they think we're so dumb, it's all out in the open. We have the story on Infowars.com. McAfee was just on about it, WayneMadsenReport.com as well. Wayne, I know you're a busy guy, we're a busy guy. We got to start powwowing about you going to D.C., to cover some of this. I know you're in D.C. a lot. Also going to Cleveland and also, going to cover the Democratic National Convention for us. Definitely going to be able to get us credentials into the Republican deal, the Democrat as well, but outside's really where the news is going to be. So I want you to get suited up and ready. Are you going to be able to cover those for us?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, that unlike the last conventions, which were basically infomercials, I think we're going to have like a little bit of a Back to the Future deal. We're going to see a lot more brokered aspects.
Battle Royale.
Yeah.
Yeah, folks had WrestleMania this weekend. This is the real WrestleMania. I mean, this is going to be wild.
Yeah, just like Chicago in '68 and Atlantic City in 1960 and some of the other conventions where, it wasn't a foreseen conclusion that these candidates were going to be nominated. So I think we're going to have aspects of that with both conventions this year.
Wow. Well, a very exciting time to be alive. I feel sorry for folks that watch mainstream television and feel bored about life. I mean, this is such an incredible time. The medical discoveries that are happening, just all of it is so incredible. The astrological things that are being discovered, the astrophysical things that are being discovered. It's such an amazing time. If you had to, in 30 seconds or in just a few words, describe the state of human and world development right now, what would it be, Wayne Madsen of WayneMadsenReport.com?
We have access now to more information that's ever been available to any one individual ever in history. And I think, although that's a good thing, I just wish that the news media that also has access to this massive amount of information would focus their attention on more important things and not, what Taylor Swift, what color stocking she
Well, we
wears.
know that's all done on purpose. They've now declassified that. But talking to your former NSA buddies and other people, when I know you go to the AP bar or whatever, I'm seeing people in the system that used to even not like me tell me, okay, you're right, we're really in deep trouble. I mean, it seems like we've won the war for the hearts and minds of the people, that we are run by globalists who are anti-free market, really anti-human, sniveling, evil people. But then everybody in government corporations go, what do we do? And quite frankly, I don't know what to do. So it seems like we're winning the info war, but then the elite are still in control, sneering down on us, quite frankly. What they do in Monty Python when they go visit the French castle, they're more than sneering at us. They're doing what on us. What do we do? Where is this going? And when you talk to those other folks, your contemporaries, are they waking up? Are some of the media people not so arrogant now?
Oh, I think so. I think you just look at this election, even though the elites are still behind the scenes trying to manipulate. But in both parties, the candidates that everybody was talking about 1 year ago was Jeb Bush against Hillary Clinton. One thing that Donald Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize for is destroying that Bush brand for at least 3 more generations, hopefully. And now, once again, Hillary is not going to be coronated, it looks like. I mean, she's having real trouble again. And Sanders...
Oh, yeah. Do you think the FBI will call for indictment?
What I understand is not only was she running her own Clinton Foundation business on that private server, but she had established her own intelligence system and classified management system to deal with that information outside the government.
Sure, she was running her own organized crime syndicate, milking the dictators.
Absolutely.
She is a true Lex Luthor in the real world. Wayne, we'll talk to you Friday. Great job. Dude gets back today. Let's start planning what we're going to do at these conventions. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, there goes Wayne Madsen.